This channel is all about igniting your love for your childhood icons from Marvel, DC Comics, and Star Wars. But in this video, we're gonna look at a statue that's a little different and a little spooky. So let's get started. The Court of the Dead is Sideshow Collectibles' marquee license. It celebrates the unsavory, the supernatural beings of the underworld, and displayed next to me is the latest statue from that line. Hello, I'm Gina, and this is my full review of Cleopsis Eater of the Dead premium format statue. Now this in fact is my very first statue from the Court of the Dead, and I have to say that seeing it in person, I'm extremely happy with the final production piece. So in this video, I'm going to elaborate what I love about this statue, and hopefully this video can help you make up your own mind about this piece. Now, if you visited this channel before, you know that I like to break down my videos into multiple segments. And in this review, I'm going to do the same thing. So, with my Evil Decepticon t-shirt on and the cameras rolling, let's begin with some background information. I'm a firm believer that every collector has at least one Court of the Dead statue that they're really drawn to. And for me, it's definitely Cleopsis Eater of the Dead. And why is that? Well, first and foremost, I love the ancient Egyptian elements that Sideshow has infused into the statue. Of course, as many of you know, the ancient Egyptians were passionate about the afterlife. So melding their culture into the Court of the Dead line is picture perfect in my opinion. As you can see here, she's adorned with a sarcophagus death mask, and her left arm is extended and she's sort of offering a serpent to her victims. And in her right hand, she's grasping a scythe, the quintessential mark of the Grim Reaper. There's a tranquility to this pose that I'm really impressed with. Now, the Court of the Dead line is often celebrated for harmonizing sculpt with elaborate mixed media. And as you can see here, that tradition was carried over really nicely with Cleopsis. So similar to previous Court of the Dead pieces, this latest statue was designed under the guidance of Tom Gillian and Tom Jensen. And the lead sculptors were Mark Newman and Alfred Paredes. And both of these artists have contributed greatly to Sideshow's Court of the Dead statues. Now I must point out that the Court of the Dead is more than just a line of statues. It's an entire universe created by the artists at Sideshow Collectibles. And of course, each character is given his or her own backstory, including Cleopsis. And her backstory is actually pretty interesting. Cleopsis holds the distinction of being Death's daughter. And with that prestige and title, she was presented to Earth to reign over the land of the pharaohs. But the ruthlessness of her sovereignty drew unwelcome attention and concerned Death. Therefore, by the hands of her own father, Cleopsis was banished to the underworld and drained of all her power. And in the underworld is where she now wanders, gripping Death's scythe and longing for the influence that she once flaunted. Now, the backstory that's been created for Cleopsis really lays the foundations for the entire design of the statue, beginning with her portraits. So let's delve into that next. This latest statue from the Court of the Dead line comes with two portraits. And as you can see here, I have it displayed with the unmasked portrait. Now, this is the frightful being behind the beauty. This is Cleopsis's true self. And right off the bat, taking a closer look, you can see that the mummification process is what dominates this portrait. Now, this is actually not my favorite portrait of this statue. But before I explain why, let me first discuss what I do like about this portrait. I'm a big fan of the discolored skin tone. It really gives this head a haunting and decomposed look. I'm also impressed with the glazed eyes, which look much better in person. Now, those are the features that I like, but what I find lacking about this portrait is her vacant expression. This is supposed to be Cleopsis's true reveal, so I would have liked to see more wrath or danger with this portrait. Now the headdress that surrounds the portrait is impeccable in my opinion. The sculpt mimics the hood on a cobra snake, and here you can see Cleopsis' braided hair, which has a bristled surface. So the same headdress and braided hair can also be found on the second portrait. This mask head is intended to be the seductive disguise for Cleopsis, and I like to refer to it as the sarcophagus death mask. Now the blue illuminated eyes are really nice in person, and the exterior of the mask looks convincingly like polished silver. Now for me personally, it is the sarcophagus mask portrait that I'll only be displaying the statue with. And of course, that's just personal preference, but in my eyes, it's the mask portrait that really brings out the majestic aura of the statue. And speaking of majestic aura, there's a ton of that in her body garments and body outfit. As I mentioned earlier in this video, one of the highlights of this piece is the harmony between the sculpt and the fabric. The cut and sew garments overlay the armor so beautifully. And in fact, in the midsection, it's difficult to tell where the sculpt ends and the fabric begins. They blend so well together. And I think that's a testament to the craftsmanship of this statue. Okay, so let's zoom in on the midsection. I love the complexity of the breastplate armor. I think this is where the sculpt of the statue excels. Now, the belt buckle is where the mixed media really shines, and first we have a very delicate fabric with a wonderful curved hem. It has this nice subtle gray color. And at the center is a decorative sash. And I really like how this sash provides royal colors to an otherwise very dark statue. Next, I want to get you up close and personal to the tools that Cleopsis has strung along her waistline. Now, don't quote me here, but I believe these represent the instruments used during the mummification process, and in my opinion, their inclusion on this statue is a perfect match. Okay, so let's focus on her outstretched arms. They are encased in very detailed armor, but in my view, the key attraction are the royal banners. They hang nearly the entire length of Cleopsis, and the maroon and black pattern reminds me of woven tapestry. And this by far is my favorite fabric on this statue. Now I must point out that there's a different material used on the reverse side of these banners, and I would have much preferred if the woven fabric was placed on both sides. While I'm on the topic of the cut and sew garments, I want to draw your eyes to the rear of the statue. Now what I really love are the torn and faded edges. It's designed to look as if there's a coat of dust layered at the ends. And it kind of conjures up images of Cleopsis walking through an ancient tomb, or perhaps wandering the underworld. And in the underworld is probably where she got her serpent and scythe from. So let's cover that next. The macabre spirit of the statue is heightened by the ghoulish snake or serpent and scythe that Cleopsis is grasping. And I want to talk first about the snake because it really is the central feature of the statue. Now, as you can see, the snake is rounded around her entire arm, and I'm a huge fan of the deeply sculpted scales. They appear almost like a channel of grooves that begin at the head and they make their way throughout the entire body of the snake. One of the undeniable qualities of this snake is the blue luminescent paint that's been added, and it does a great job of signifying that this snake is not from Earth. Now let's move to the scythe that Cleopsis is grasping. I'm really impressed with the crescent-shaped design, but what I love even more is how the scythe is made to appear as if it's constructed out of bones. The ivory paint application is flawless, and peeping out of this weapon is a skull with a very frightful expression. Now, I'm not into skulls per se, but the intricate sculpt on this one is executed skillfully in my opinion. Now, this Grim Reaper scythe and the snake both keep the statue grounded in the underworld. But in the next section, I'm excited to talk about the base, because it's the base that pulls in a lot of Egyptian elements back into the statue. Similar to other Court of the Dead statues, the base on Cleopsis has a small footprint. In other words, it has a relatively tiny circumference, and it's designed to resemble a stone podium. And encircling the 3 tiers of the podium are engraved hieroglyphics. Hieroglyphics that are worthy of a pharaoh's tomb. Now, scampering across the base are scarab beetles, and in fact, these insects were typically placed on top of mummies during funerals. So the relationship with Cleopsis makes perfect sense. And in my opinion, these beetles are so well sculpted and they have a beautiful blue tint. And I love how they're scurrying away from Cleopsis. It suggests that even these little guys fear the Eater of the Dead. Okay, so on top of these Egyptian themes, we also have references to the Court of the Dead universe, highlighted of course by the Court of the Dead symbols and insignia at the very front of the base. So overall, I'm really impressed with this base. However, I would have much preferred if the base was just a little bit larger. Now, I'm not advocating for a gigantic base, but it could have been about 2 inches wider and still fit comfortably on a shelf. Now, other than that small point, I think the base turned out really well. In my opinion, part of the success of the Court of the Dead line is that the artists have given each of the characters a slightly different theme. But it's not enough to give the characters a theme. That theme has to meld well with the Court of the Dead line. And that brings me to my global concept of what I love about Cleopsis Eater of the Dead. I've been mentioning it throughout the entire video, and that's the ancient Egyptian elements. I think it works really well with the underworld kingdom of the Court of the Dead. Now, I do like 3 very, very specific features of this statue, and number 3 on my list can be found on the base. The scarab beetles are easily one of my favorite features of this piece, and despite their diminutive size, they add a creepy ambience to the base, and they're executed so perfectly in my opinion. Okay, so my second favorite feature of this statue is the mask portrait. It captures the elegance and eeriness of a sarcophagus, and it has a tremendous influence over the entire statue. And finally, my number 1 favorite feature of Cleopsis Eater of the Dead are the majestic banners hanging from both arms. They are a beautiful representation of Egyptian tapestry, and their sheer size complements the tall physique of Cleopsis. These banners were a huge factor in my decision to add this statue to my collection. Now, of course, these are just my personal feelings on this statue. So in the comment section below, be sure to share what you think of Cleopsis Eater of the Dead. And if you want to view even more photos of her, be sure to check out my Cleopsis photo gallery video on this channel. And finally, please check out other collector videos on this statue. There's some great ones right now on YouTube. And on that note, I want to thank you for watching this comprehensive review. I really hope you enjoyed it. Take care.